Welcome back to Digital Moneyball Academy and our series on Moneyball Messaging. In this session, we're going to examine the two driving principles behind our approach to messaging. So you need to get clicks, you need to get meetings, you need to make impacts in those meetings. And if you're like most, whether you're in sales or marketing, you're generally talking about the things that make you good, even great, or at least different. And you're trying to do that in a way that aligns with what target customers actually care about. But here I am telling you that that stuff just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't break through today's saturation. Before we talk about what to say or how to say it, we need to first delve into the whys. Why this stuff just doesn't work in today's age of saturation. And if you don't mind, again, I'm going to wheel in my whiteboard for this discussion. In our first session, we asserted that there was just a tremendous amount of bad, irrelevant, ineffective B2C advice that has somehow made its way into the B2B playbooks, and we needed to get those ingredients out. And we even see this show up with smart and talented marketers. So it's important that we think about these things and calibrate. Because what we find is that our intuitions, which largely stem from our own experiences in the B2C world, our intuitions often corrupt thinking around the much different B2B sales game, especially that of the post-COVID digital age. We often need to remind our clients that in B2B, decision drivers are different. And we say this often enough that we condense it to an acronym. Clients hear 3D, decision drivers are different. This, in fact, is our first principle. And the roots of 3D, the key differences between B2B and B2C decision-making, largely stem from a few sources, which we're going to discuss today. The first we call other people's money. The second is a well-known heuristic called loss aversion, an incredibly powerful force in B2B. And the third is something that we call bottom-line impacts. Now, even though some might have heard about things like loss aversion, as you'll see in our playbooks, these three things are not independent, they're interdependent. They actually build on each other, they actually multiply together in many ways. Let's start with other people's money. So if we're buying a new car, a new purse, a new golf club, we're generally spending our own money on ourselves in the B2C world. In B2B, however, as famed economist Milton Friedman might describe it, people are generally spending other people's money on other people. As Friedman points out, the government operates this way. And because of this, things like quality, value, things that would intuitively be important decision criteria to us in our personal lives often give way to different, more personal costs and benefits in the B2B world. A purchasing agent buying a large piece of equipment never actually uses that item, nor will the specifying engineer. They really don't get personal benefits. However, they do bear personal costs. And let's start cataloging some of these key takeaways as well. So, for example, personal costs include additional work required for new supplier due diligence, the politics and the litany of approvals needed to establish consensus for a different vendor, the lunch on Thursday with a friendly incumbent supplier who needs to be told that he lost the order. All of these things are personal costs. And even though the new prospective supplier, maybe it's you, maybe you represent some really good things for the company, better products, reduced cost, improved value, diversification of suppliers, that's important. But for the person, for the decision maker, switching to something different poses personal costs which most often far outweigh personal benefits. Different is normally bad in B2B, unless, of course, you're the incumbent supplier. Let's go to the second force. You'll see how these things fit together. So the biggest personal cost is often born in the form of risk of loss. In his groundbreaking work called Thinking Fast and Slow, Danny Kahneman gave us just remarkable insights into how people operate and make decisions. And he presented a myriad of mechanisms and shortcuts, things he called heuristics, that we use every day to make decisions and that guide our behavior. He might be one of the most referenced authors today. One such phenomenon, part of Kahneman and his colleague Amos Tversky's field of prospect theory, is called loss aversion. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to make a brief digression for those unfamiliar with this concept. Let's say I were to give you a consequential sum of money. Say I gave you $1,000. And I were to then offer you either a sure thing, an additional $500, or a 50% chance, a coin flip to win an extra $1,000. Which would you take? That's scenario one. In scenario two, let's say instead I give you $2,000 this time, but I now make you choose between a sure thing loss of $500 or a coin flip now for losing $1,000. Now, if we were completely rational decision makers, whether it's the coin flip or the sure thing, we'd make the same choice for both cases because both cases are in fact the same. The sure thing is $1,500 either way, and the coin flip is between $1,000 and $2,000 both ways. However, most people take the sure thing in the first scenario, but they take the gamble, the coin flip, in the second. And the reason, the authors assert, is that we fear losses more than we value comparable gains. So what does that mean for B2B? If decision makers choose something different, if they depart from their normal routine, they introduce a little bit of chaos into their own lives. And they take a chance, they take a risk of personal loss, which can greatly exceed personal benefits. Selecting a new vendor who delivers a faulty product might affect reputation, might mean a bad performance review, a nasty phone conversation with an operations manager. In extreme cases, it might even mean their job. And these can dwarf any personal benefits, accolades, bonuses. The prospect of losses outweighs the gains for anything quote-unquote different. Those of us over the age of 40 have likely heard the phrase, nobody gets fired for buying IBM. That's loss aversion in B2B. In B2C, consumers figured out really fast there were much better options for personal computers. B2B took forever. They might never have if it weren't for consumers. And the key takeaway here is that loss aversion is a much stronger force in the B2B space than in the B2C space. And the consequences are important as well. The consequences are less than optimal decisions. Or not losing is vastly more influential than actually winning. And that also makes incumbency a really powerful position. So here you were, like most. You're thinking that showing yourself as a winner was the right approach. Nope. Best this, best that just doesn't work. And whether you're talking about you or if you're trying to solve pain points, whether you're trying to talk to customers about themselves, most companies try to sell by painting the path with them as a winner. And it's just the wrong approach. And we'll get back to that. Let's look at the third force first, again, which builds on the first two. Bottom line impacts. B2B decision makers wear two hats, and we find it useful even to think about them as having a multiple personality disorder of sorts. Pat, the person with their own self-interests, and Chris, the company representative with the company's interests. And the decision drivers for each are different, but it's important to sufficiently appeal to both with your message. Pat spends other people's money and fears losses, as we've discussed. And to compel Pat to change, you need to make Pat aware of the personal risks or losses incurred with Pat's current approach. Chris thinks rationally, though, and makes decisions based on impacts to the bottom line, or KPIs. This makes Chris's decisions less about emotion and more about sound logic and quantifiable impacts. And the key takeaway here is that your message needs to have the ingredients of both logic and emotion. Note that this isn't persona development. It's the ingredients required for the same person. And we'll talk about this in depth when we talk about the 8 ingredients of a good message, as well as the techniques that we'll use for both logical and emotional rhetoric. As a slight digression, even the concept of product experience is much different in B2B, and this is a great illustration of where B2C concepts corrupt thinking. We work with clients, especially for things like new IoT services, who think that customers want a level of engagement with their product like they experience 40 hours a week or so. And they again borrow concepts from B2C around things like immersion, user experience. But so often the ideal B2B product experience is something like, it sits over there and it just runs. We never touch it. It just works. And that's a great example of where so many smart people's B2C intuitions throw them off. While B2C sales and marketing are largely about brand and emotions, think Coke and the Polar Bear commercial. Think Nike commercials, Apple, how BMWs. It's about how the brands are designed to make you feel. In B2B, though, decisions need justification that are just oriented towards company performance, like how much money is saved, productivity gained, etc. And when B2B marketers bring over B2C concepts, ideas, playbooks, they fail. And the fact is that while customers care about their new BMW or a new golf club or a new purse, they just don't care about the electrical, the mechanical, the automation, the other products they're buying in the business. They don't care if it's the most reliable product or that it has cool features or that it's well supported with great service. They might care a little now about what the product actually does for the company, like improving operations, saving cost, reducing risk. That's Chris. But what they really care about, Pat, is how the product decision will impact them personally. And this fundamental difference makes so many B2C strategies completely irrelevant, ineffective in the B2B space. And it's the key reason for this major takeaway. Lead gen marketing and prospecting trump brand marketing in B2B. B2B, it's about connecting with people in a way that allows them to consider your value. Again, you hear all this talk about brand, largely deriving from its greater importance in B2C. Yes, brand is still relevant, but lead gen rules in B2B, and messaging for lead gen and prospecting is different than brand messaging. And that's what we're seeking to create through this. I hope that makes sense. It frankly doesn't to a lot of firms, and you can tell. And this is why we prefer to frame new customer acquisition not as a selling effort, but rather as a change management effort. And as it turns out, and many know this, change management has a playbook. It starts with creating the burning platform to get people out of their comfort zones and to move. In fact, our messaging techniques are built around that fundamental difference. You need to do that first. Only then, later, afterwards, can you start to show how your path might be a winner. A couple notes before we move on to the second principle. To be clear here, many might be thinking about negative selling, bad-mouthing competition. That's not what we're talking about here. Good messaging is far more nuanced than that. The other big difference to remember is that B2B decisions are often group decisions. And while individuals can make rational, predictable decisions, groups, as we know, can often behave irrationally. And effective salespeople and marketers need to consider the wide array of stakeholders and influencers in the decision-making process. Second principle is value alignment. This will be a little shorter discussion here, but let's start here. We don't believe that sales or marketing needs to use sophistry or manipulation. Rather, we believe that different firms provide different forms of value. Some excel at low prices, some top quality products, some superior customer service or support, some a local hometown presence. Different buyers will value these things differently. And if that weren't the case, there wouldn't be opportunities for different firms to participate in the same market. The market would be completely homogeneous. It wouldn't have our squares, triangles, and circles like we're showing here. Now, the right message allows you to seek out and find customers in the industry who value what you have to offer, the things that truly make you different than the competition and that matter to customers in the market. The best messages are designed to uncover value alignment between you and those customers. Now, some customers might have faults in understanding how to best attain that value in the market, and some firms might demonstrate incongruence between what they really value and how they behave, their purchasing behaviors. We're going to challenge them to truly uncover what they value, and we'll probably educate them or remind them some other things that they might not be considering. It's like an iceberg. We're going to go deeper, beneath the surface. The job of sales and marketing is to make connections between your firm and customers who value what you sell. Now, chances are you're selling something that the prospect currently buys from someone else. If you have discretionary goods, these playbooks still work. There's slight differences, but chances are they're just buying it from somebody else. Now, the customers might think that their values and behaviors line up, but we're going to poke and prod, and we're going to get them to consider some new things beneath the surface with our effective message, things that might actually shift what they value. This is the art in your message. Customers often buy from firms who don't match up with what they truly value, and those are the customers you should seek to connect with. In fact, a big part of the job of sales and marketing and the function of a good message is to uncover what customers truly value, perhaps even getting them to consider some things they might not already know. And that discussion requires a lot more sophistication than merely telling them the wonderful things about you or even talking to them about their pain points and things like that. It requires getting to the real underlying reasons for why they think and why they behave like they do, and whether they truly believe their current approach is the right approach. And if not, maybe they're better lined up with you. So in summary, B2B, it's kind of like, look, if it's working, leave it alone. Don't upset the apple cart. People are resistant to change, and not losing is vastly more important than winning. People are resistant to change for many reasons. And you're the outsider. You represent different and change. And different carries more personal cost than benefits, mainly in terms of a much more consequent risk of loss. And for these reasons, you're just not going to be effective by painting yourself as a winner. That's selling. And the key is that you're really not selling in B2B. You're change managing. This is the foundation of our approach. And now that we know these things, or perhaps now that we're reacquainted with them, we're going to flip these forces around. In our message, we'll appeal to loss aversion. We'll make it our friend. We'll talk to both Pat and Chris, both of whom will need to change manage, and we'll show how our value really might overlap with theirs. And we'll show you how to cover all of these bases in this series, especially the 8 ingredients video later in this series. But these are the principles behind our playbook. We hope they make sense.